Hello there. Welcome to Story Hour. I'm Kathy Ramsperger. I'm a journalist, a humanitarian, and an award-winning novelist of The Shores of Our Souls and the upcoming A Thousand Flying Things. I'm also a coach who created Step Into Your Story, and I'm here to connect people that love books. Welcome, everyone. I concentrate on transformational stories of international interest, multicultural relations, and social justice that focus on connections and often disconnections between people. And our guest today, author Michele Kwasniewski, has written an entire trilogy about something our world is facing right now, and has always faced, but it just keeps expanding because of social media and influencers, and that is celebrity. Her trilogy is called The Rise and Fall of Danny Trueheart, and it's an incredible and important prominent social issue globally. The peaks and valleys of fame, especially fame at a young age, and the trilogy is a young adult trilogy, but it's very applicable to everyone, no matter what our age is. Welcome to Story Hour again, Michele.
Thanks for having me back. Hi, Kathy.
So a little bit about Michele, in case you missed our first time. She spent over 15 years in film and television production, and her experience shows as the backdrop to her books. She started out as a film set assistant on movies like Independence Day, Face Off, Primal Fear, even Evita. And she eventually switched to TV as a production manager and is associated with such shows as Big Brother, Adoption Stories, Extra Yardage, and Meet the Pandas. She's also a current member of Producers Guild of America. And I said that her experience inspired her to write this trilogy, and she lives in San Clemente, California, such a beautiful part of California. Here are some of the awards her first two books received, and I'm sure the third will soon follow. Rising Star and Burning Bright won Best Performing Arts Book for the 2022 American Writing Awards, Best Young Adult Fiction Book and General Fiction Book for the 2022 Royal Dragonfly Awards, and Best Young Adult Book for the 2023 Pencraft Winter Book Awards. Wow. And her reviews from young adult readers read like social media posts, like this one. Danny's success and singing career are exploding. So fun to share in her adventure, but the risks are very real, and everybody seems ready to try to take advantage of her. Feels very real and what it must be like in the music scene, and also young in Hollywood. Great fun for young women who like music and celebrity stories. There are many authors who call this a 5-star read. Nicole Gabor, award-winning author of Catwalk, says, pop sensation Danny Trueheart's star is dimmed after a life-changing event, jeopardizes her career and relationships with the few people she can still trust. Falling Star gives an honest portrayal of the sacrifices made in the spotlight and what one must do to stay there. Your heart will break, but you'll also root for Danny as she picks up the pieces of her shattered life and aspires to even greater heights. And here's some praise from someone who's been there, George from Kool and the Gang. He says, Michele Kwasniewski brings to life both the glamour and pressure of being a star. So would you just catch us up a little bit, Michele? Welcome again. As about the first two books in a couple sentences each, that brings us to this dramatic opening in book 3.
Of course. So in book 1, which is called Rising Star, hope it's not too glary, I like to summarize it. On the brink of discovery, 15-year-old aspiring pop star Danny Trueheart questions her own desire for fame and motivations of the adults pushing her toward her dreams. So that's the first book in a nutshell.
I loved that book.
So it was a lot of fun. And I feel like this book was very mild and almost innocent compared to the other two in the series. And the second book is called Burning Bright. And I'm just going to read it to make sure I get everything. With her
Absolutely.
ego growing as fast as her fame and fortune, a string of platinum hits, and her jealous mother desperate for a piece of her wealth, 16-year-old pop sensation Danny Trueheart navigates the glamour and perils of stardom and scandal as scandal threatens to ruin her and everyone who helped make her a star. I love that part.
I love that part too. I love the depth of the mother character, and I love that it brings us right up to this. So in Falling Star, Danny is now 16. I had to keep reminding myself that she was 15 when this started and 16 now, because there's a lot in these three books. And she's now a pop sensation, and she regains consciousness amid the smoking wreckage of a car accident. The crumbled body of a bicyclist splayed on the ground. Moments after the accident, her manager reaches the scene, and his impulsive decision sets in motion a chain of events that will have catastrophic consequences for everyone, especially Danny, not to mention lots of scandal. Danny must choose between accepting responsibility for her disastrous choices, and I should also say teenage choices, possibly destroying her fame and fortune, or sacrificing those who made her famous and everyone she loves to preserve the stardom she has spent her entire life working to achieve. Will Danny stay true to her heart? You're going to have to read to see. It might not be what you think. So I adore the message you're putting out into the world, Michelle, and I adore these books. You're such a great writer.
Oh, thank you.
So how how are these books different than what you experienced, if at all, in your career?
Well, just in the basic, I mean, I was behind the scenes, so my notoriety really didn't travel very far other than people looking for a production manager to manage their budget or hire their crews. So that was, I think, one of the main differences. And also, too, I was never really judged for what I looked like. I could show up what it did as long as I wore the clothes, I could get the job done, like jeans, if I was lifting stuff or whatever. It didn't really matter too much what I looked like as long as I could get the job done. But there are a lot more similarities than you would think. The pressure in front of and behind the camera, whether it's television or film, or even I want to say in a recording studio, there's always someone who wants your job. You get a job, and there are 15 people behind you who really feel like they could do that job better. So they try to, like, maybe tell your boss they could do it. Like, I could do that job quicker. I could do it for it. You could only have to pay me this amount of money. You're paying her too much money. So you feel like you can't ever take a time off. You can't ever take your foot off the gas. And you're always trying to outdo everyone to put your best foot forward. So it's not enough to get the job, but you have to keep outperforming your last endeavor just to prove to your boss that you're worthy to keep on to the next show. Because my jobs, for the most part, I did a lot of freelancing. So you're only as good as your last job. And even though you're working for anywhere from 3 weeks to maybe 6 or 9 months, you're still always looking for that next job as soon as this job finishes. So that, I think, is something that's very, very similar, is just kind of that cutthroat atmosphere where you're always looking behind your back, and it's not enough just to nab that perfect job that you want, but you have to keep performing to keep it. And I know a lot of industries have that, but it seems like it's particularly cutthroat in Hollywood.
I can imagine that. Um, I have dealt with the celebrities from Hollywood on a very superficial basis. And because I was safe, they would tell me stories. So I can see that. I think the arts are incredibly competitive, and so people are willing to do just about anything if they are of that variety to get to the top.
I definitely think so. And I think there's also a surprising amount of ego behind the camera as well as in front of the camera. And I'm not talking about like the big producers and directors had made it. But even the lesser known people like me, you'd be surprised at how many people think of themselves almost like in the third person, the way that they act and the way that they treat people. It was a really big eye opener to see how many people thought it was okay to be rude or to speak to someone a certain way. And I'm not even talking about the whole Me Too movement, which was not happening when I was coming up, and that's a whole different conversation. But so there's a large number of egos, and you really have to have your head screwed on straight to know what you are and are not willing to put up with. I had a lot of bosses who would yell, and they thought that was an acceptable way to tell me how to do something, and that is not a good way to talk to me. And so you end up having to learn how to navigate that.
Um, I always say I might seem genteel, but I have had everything in the whole world said and done to me, things thrown at me, cursing, screaming, tirades.
Yeah.
I get it. Um, so thank you for that. I love how your experience echoes upon Danny. Um, so you mentioned that your series gets darker as time goes by. Reminds me of another author that I know that did that. And I think it works so well because your audience is aging along with Danny. They're not aging, but
Yeah.
they're getting older. And did you plan on this from the beginning, or did you write it all at once and then I'm sure you tinkered with it, but how did you plan this? Because it's
Well,
so well done.
thank you. Well, this is my first book writing endeavor. So it was a lot of trial and error on my part. And the first book then took 7 years to actually come to just being complete, because I would stop and start and I hadn't really given myself any permission to be a writer.
Right.
And it was originally told in like the third person past tense. There was a lot of inner dialogue for Danny, her mom, Martin, and Jenna. So you were hearing it from 4 different perspectives. So, and all of that got changed and pulled out because we figured out that it wasn't connecting with the readers. They were losing Danny and all the adult perspective and not having it be first person. So, and once I made it first person in the present and we solely focused on Danny, it really took off. But the first book, even my agent, my editor said, you know what, it's like she's Pollyanna almost. It's almost too good. It's almost too happy. And I'm like, well, there'll be more coming, but I did have to kind of rough her up a little bit and make her a little bit more realistic as far as just like kind of maybe being a little crabby or just, not all teenagers are happy and as innocent and pliable as Danny was in my first draft. But I had always planned for it to get darker because one, her situations were getting more serious because the pressure is building. She's in the public eye. She's now supporting all of these adults by earning this money and singing. So they're going to want more money, and she's the way they get more money. And then also she's growing up. And as you grow up, unfortunately, she didn't have a ton of people protecting her to begin with, but you're more out there on your own, more responsible for your decisions. And I think that you also learn, and this is one of the things I was hoping I could really nail with this series, is that not everything is black and white. And I remember being a young adult, everything was like black or white, and there was no in between. I'd get in so many fights with like my mom or my dad or whatever.
We're taught that as kids, that
Yeah.
this is right and this is wrong. And there's no, my parents used to say this, there's no gray area.
Yeah.
True.
And when you're trying to get your teenager, not to do drugs and not to drink and not to cheat on tests, absolutely. But I think we realize, and it's almost one of the great like letdowns as a teenager, is that it isn't all black and white. Every hero has a dark side, and every, villain does have like maybe a speck of gold in their dark heart. And it's just, and I think that those stories are the more poignant stories because we can all relate to that. No one is all good and bad. And I think Danny learns that the hard way. And it's more of a question of, well, I might not be getting what I want, but what can I live with? And I think that in the third book is the choice that Danny's making. She's really maturing, even though she's only just turning 17. She's maturing and she's really kind of saying, I'll settle for this because I can live with this. And she might not love it, but she'll take it.
I love that the ending is so realistic that way, because that's life. I also wanted to say, and we as humans all make mistakes.
Every single one of us. And we all have
Um,
moments that we're not proud of and that we don't want anyone, to think about or tie to our name. And maybe it's not a car accident, but it definitely is, there's stuff that we wish that we hadn't done. But I think a lot of those moments were either made when you were younger or you were really under pressure. There was a rash decision. It's just something that where if you just had, a little bit more time to think about it, you probably wouldn't have made that decision. We can
it's
all relate.
true, but young people in the camera's eye, I'll say that, um, the stakes are so much greater for these,
Yeah.
for for every move they make. And uh, somebody that could overdrink at a party or whatever and just be nobody until say they were 35. I'm not sure that even happens anymore, but um, would not bear the same brunt unless somebody was filming the whole thing and then brought it out later, which happens too. But yeah,
And that's the whole, one of the whole dark sides is that before you could mess up, like you said, no one's going to remember. They might be too drunk to remember, but it's that constant reminder of your faults and your mistakes. And I don't think that like you're never allowed to get away from those mistakes. And I think that is one of the one of the many huge downsides of social media. And you have to really trust who you're hanging out with, having a cocktail, because how do you know that if you've got someone who's against you, they could just be pulling a Kayla,
and
doing stuff and then putting it online. So
who can you trust?
yeah,
Who can you trust?
it's
Yeah.
very important.
So um, I'd like to talk about just a little bit more about being young when you start to want to be
Mhm.
in the spotlight. And if I remember the first book correctly, Danny has always wanted to be, or thought she wanted to be. Her mother was pushing her too.
Her mother's pushing her, and but she's always loved dancing, and she used to be in pageants when she was younger, just singing, dancing, like that's just what she did, and she loved it. And so she never really put too much of a fight that her mom was scheduling her so that she'd have to miss class, she'd have to go travel for competition, she didn't get to see her friends that much, she didn't have a lot of free time, and let alone she was never pushed to be educated, because she kept being pulled out of school. um so she never really put up a fight with it. And I know her older sister had issues with it, Gina, and because she had been pushed to be a gymnastics star, and to the point where she ended up developing an eating disorder just to get away from her mother's controlling nature.
Mhm.
And Danny never cottoned on to her mom's motivations, and kind of ignored Gina's warnings and just kind of went along for the ride. She's like, what's the harm? I love what I'm doing, so it's not a big deal. And I think as she realizes, as she gets older, she's kind of like, it's like, when you're being launched out of like a nuclear silo. Once that starts going, you really can't stop. There's no going
Once you're
back.
launched, it's
Yeah.
so hard to go back.
Yeah.
I'm quite an advanced adult, and I think, what would happen if I just didn't do Facebook anymore? Would the world end? Because it feels like it, because you're launched, right?
Yeah.
So in terms of a young adult who doesn't have her prefrontal cortex completely there, it must seem like it's her destiny. That's just what she has to keep doing.
Yeah.
So, and that's a little bit in book two.
Yeah.
In a way, it's almost the entire focus, but it's very subtle. There's a lot more that happens in book two, but it's about her decision about what she wants. Um, and it goes on into book three, but not very far into book three. I think
Yeah.
she, go
I
ahead.
agree. And I think that that it's that subtle where she's being pushed all in book one, and then all of a sudden it's a shift where she's kind of paddling along and she's not being pushed as much from behind. They're certainly all behind her, helping her go forward, but she's now in it. She's
Mhm.
kind of drunk the Kool-Aid. And then in book three, it literally is she's on her own and she has to make her own choice. And I think that she's just at that stage where she could never step away from it. She doesn't feel comfortable. So she does whatever she can to maintain that.
So can we talk a little bit about all the different choices that she has to make? I'm thinking Martin. I'm thinking I love the name of the person that comes in. Peril, is that her name? That's
Oh,
not her name.
Parish Jones.
Parish.
Oh yeah, I was debating that name for months. I actually had a Parish / a different name, just a regular name. And I kept going back and forth. And it wasn't until I just turned it into my agent that I pulled the plug and I made the switch.
It's I saw, angel and devil
Yeah.
on the folder when with
Yeah.
both of those. But there are other people like Sean, and I don't want you to have to talk about the end at all, but how does she navigate those people? I mean, how does she I mean, Martin, I think in a way was a better parent than her parent and allowed her to grow up.
Yeah.
Um, so do you think, okay, I'm going to say this. Do you think there needs to be a minimum age to start trying for the dream? Or do you think people at 16, 17, younger are prepared to figure out this, it's a big picture choice.
Yeah.
Martin says it's about her soul.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard. I always feel like it's hard to say completely something that would apply to everyone, because you have kids that are like, going to college when they're like 9 and they're graduating because they're just that smart. But it doesn't mean that they're emotionally developed for that as
Mm.
well, because college isn't just about getting your diploma. It's about learning how to do your laundry and party and then pass your test the next day. And there's a whole bunch of other social lessons too. And I kind of feel like that's kind of what Danny is. She's almost this really gifted kid who gets thrust into the situation, but she has no other training for any of those other adult situations she's finding herself in this adult business. And
Mhm.
I've always felt that I think that you need to really have a good parent or guardian advocating for you. And if you don't have that, the system's going to fail, because there are rules in place about how many hours a child can work. They have to have schooling, dot, dot, dot. And you would hope that the parent or guardian would make sure that, like, what, they want to go to their best friend's birthday party. They want to do this, and make sure that they have time to just be a kid, not just be a working kid and a kid going to school, but that carefree playtime. That's so important growing up. And as a
Mm.
teenager, just loafing time with your friends, not even necessarily doing anything, just to be a teen. And that's the one thing I think that if they could, put that into law, that it's not just enough to make sure they get enough sleep and they don't work more than, 8 hours or 6 hours a day, and they get their education, but make sure they can have time with their friends and family. But I don't know that any law is going to really regulate that. But that would be the one thing, if I could change, I would.
Well, from your mouth to lobbyists' ears or whatever, because I think that would be a definite solution. If it might be a compromise, but it would still solve some things. So I wanted to read, this is actually a little continuation of what we were talking about how Danny puts her situation. She says, it sounds easy enough. Be considerate, be honest, be nice, but no one really knows what it's like to be me. And that just broke my heart. No one. No one else in my life has to deal with the paparazzi, the constant pressure of obsessive fans, per record companies' expectations to sell albums, jealousy from high school haters, creepy lurkers, lying traitors. It's no wonder I have trouble. And my heart just goes out to her, because, and the fact that she does so much right is almost miraculous. I was just cheering for her the whole time. All right, very deep stuff here. So let's go to something more fun. I loved how you let Danny's Insta fans speak at the end of every chapter. I was waiting for that. That must have been so fun. And do you have a favorite comment that you?
I did. I had two. I liked, that was a lot of fun to write. And that was a late addition. Both the comments from the reporter, as well as from his articles, as well as the comments, because I just felt like there was something missing. There was a lot of stuff I wanted to put in there, and I wanted people to get the feeling like they're checking a Glenn's blog, or they're checking their Instagram accounts or whatever, to see what people are saying. So I really liked the one, it's in the end of chapter 9, where they're talking about about trying to help work with the Japanese fan club to try and rally and support.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I just, and because I like it because you get to paint a picture, but you have to have all these different voices and the username means something too. And then you have the random, which we all get on social media, the weird ads or like comments on your thing about
Those
selling you something that
ads
you
were
don't
just
need at all.
priceless.
So it was a lot of fun.
So
And
funny.
I liked to, the, the fact that you can have a group of people that are on like a fan page, or they're all commenting on one thread in some kind of chat room. And then you have one of them who's a member, but they just like snap and they change their opinion on what everyone else is thinking, or they dare to say something else, and how everyone kind of snaps back and whatever. I just kind of like how that was able to play out as well. And I just feel like this was another just insight of what celebrities deal with, because they get that all the time. And they,
Mhm.
luckily, if you're big enough, you have people to take care of that for you. So you hopefully don't have to even look at it. But I know that a lot of people do read the comments. You know, they always say you're never supposed to read the comments and articles about you or whatever. But
It's like not looking at your reviews as a writer. How can you do that? I know people that don't.
it's funny because I take views with a really big grain of salt, because again, not everyone is going to love me, and
Oh, absolutely.
you just have to say that. So I think if I can get something from a review, I want to look, is guy or gal person being mean spirited? Are they being really honest? Maybe they just didn't connect with the story, or is there something that I can improve next time around? Like, oh, well, maybe I should consider that because it's something I hadn't thought of before. So I
Well,
do read them, but I don't always take them to heart.
yeah, well, good, because I think that there are lots of people on Insta hiding behind an identity, if that makes
I
sense.
100% agree.
And they say things that they wouldn't ordinarily say. They don't think about what they're going to say, and then often they can say it in a mean spirit. So I think that to be a teenager and to have to deal with that on her level, because she's a star, um, must I'm glad I never had to do that, or had to even deal with Instagram as a child, frankly, but I
Yeah.
think it's here to stay. So
Unfortunately, I do too. And I can see I can see it causes a lot of damage and stress and just self-esteem issues. And you're already having stress and self-esteem issues when you're a teenager anyway, with
mm,
everything changing. And it's just, I can't even imagine.
mhm, I can't either. But they seem to get through it. I mean, the ones that you see a lot, I'm not gonna name names, but you see people mature. They're one way at, say, 15 and another way at 25, and then by the time they're 30, they're grown.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always happen, but it's wonderful to see it when it does.
Yeah.
All your books are incredibly researched from life, is the way I like to put it, and they also are incredibly realistic, right down to the blood and the gore, and I'm going to say the word vomit,
Yes.
which
A lot of
which
vomit.
which your young adults must just be really into. Um, so I'm sure they see themselves in Danny. And has anybody come to you that just stands out in your mind, that talked about how it helped them, either with deciding whether to go into the business, or being early in the business, anything like that?
I haven't heard that per se, but I have heard from a lot of people that they didn't realize everything that went along with pursuing a career like that. Now, again, I worked in film and I put it in music, so I didn't want to get sued by anyone I knew. So I tried to change the whole thing altogether, and that's why. And I love music, so that's why I did music. But I think they're just surprised that it's. And look, even just being an author, it's not enough to write the book and to get the agent and to get the publisher. You have to sell yourself and keep almost every single day. Keep reminding people that, oh, I did this, and you keep doing that, and then you've got to produce another book. Well, I haven't had a book in 6 months, so I've got to do another book. It's that constant expectation of performance, and you constantly having to be in that spotlight. And I think that that's what people have most commented on, just in general, because I think almost everyone I've talked to has wanted to either be a rock star or a pop star or a musician, and some people actresses or actors. And I think that the one universal comment is that they didn't realize how much that entailed, not just getting there, but just staying there. And again, I don't think they realize, you hear that someone's got an agent or a publicist, but I don't think they realize how many people you're actually supporting when you are a star. And, they're pumping so many, for Danny's case, millions of dollars to put her on tour and do this album and everything else too. And they expect performance. And a lot of times that comes with either a morality clause, or they expect you to have like a pristine image, in social media, so you're not hurting the brand. And that's a lot of pressure for someone who's still learning how to regulate their impulses when they're a teenager.
Mhm. It's hard for anybody
Yeah.
to be a brand, right?
Yeah.
It just is.
I would imagine, well, because we all get frustrated trying to drive or not finding a parking space, and how many times we like honk the horn or like and then all you need is someone like snapping their cell phone and then sending it off to TMZ, and then there you are, like, Michelle loses it on, in the traffic or whatever. So it's so easy to get caught out. You cannot be polished or perfect all the time.
No.
And that's why, and it's just like I call the series The Rise and Fall, because people love, it's like they fall in love with people like Brad Pitt or Britney Spears or whoever it is, and they just can't get enough. So you see posts about them everywhere, articles, movies, they're everywhere. And then all of a sudden, once they're up at the top, it gets kind of boring after a while. And then they like to slap them down. And almost every famous person in the planet has had that. They rise them up super quickly, and then they slap them down just as quickly. And it's the ones that keep getting back up that have long careers. And that's it's kind of like a sick cycle, because who would want to wish someone, ill or see them suffer like that? But the audiences do, and it's crazy.
I'm really hoping that we finally realize that we're all human and that we all have strengths and weaknesses, and that celebrities are human.
And it's an impossible. You're just setting someone up for failure if you're expecting them to be perfect, camera ready, perfect all the time. Because people have bad days. They have deaths in their family, or they're dealing with marriage issues or kid issues or whatever it is, and they're allowed to be sad or be, not funny or not want to talk. And it doesn't mean they're a bad person. And it's hard because people are so ready to jump on anything exciting. And a lot of times that means negative stories. It's not all, it's for the most part, it's usually not positive.
And it's become a whole industry about managing those stories. And I think we would get a lot more creativity in the world. This is just my little opinion. If we let people have a little bit more freedom to make small mistakes, not big ones. Can you talk about that kind of pressure and how it led to the accident? Or am I giving something away here asking?
No, I think that we can talk about that, because that is, I think, out. Book 2's been out for definitely a while, so I think that that's okay. Yeah, we can talk. In Burning Bright, in book 2, Danny is just on this incredible hamster wheel of a schedule where there are no breaks. She's starts up a tour. She leaves her family and boyfriend, and she is just constantly having to perform new cities. And she's in the United States, she's driving a bus. Then in Europe, she's on another bus. And there's just a lot of pressure, and she's having a disconnect with her boyfriend and her best friend at home because of the time difference. And honestly, her ego is getting a little, it's starting to inflate a little bit. And she ends up hanging out a lot with this guy named Bo, who's one of her backup dancers. And then he's slightly older than her, but not, I think he's like 19. And then, so they will go hang out on the bus, and he gives her, a cocktail now and again. And she gets into this habit because she notices it takes the edge off. And again, I think a lot of times with kids in high school, I remember you have a little something at a party, and it's just all that stress that you're like, is someone looking at me? Do I have something on my face? Like, is my outfit okay? Whatever it is, my grades, it just takes the pressure off. But I think that as a kid, it sometimes can become a crutch because you don't know how to use it, how to regulate that. And for Danny, that little cocktail here and there does become a crutch for her to deal with her anxiety, to deal with her pressure, to deal with things she doesn't want to deal with. And I don't think that that's an uncommon story, not just for teens, but just for people in general, where people need an emotional crutch to get through whatever crisis or situation that they're trying to get through.
I love your saying that about people in general too. because my audience is mainly adults, and we're all just grown kids anyway.
For
But
sure, for
um,
sure.
but I don't think this is just teenagers that are using emotional crutches, and it's getting dangerous for all of us right now. So thank you for bringing that up too. In both the books and here, because it's a huge challenge for society.
And I think if we can normalize it and let people know that you're not the only one, you're not weak. And people use different things. Some use social media, some use working out, their phone, they use meds. I mean, you can use anything as a crutch. But
Yeah.
when your dependence on that one thing starts interfering with your daily life, you do have to take a look and be like, well, maybe I need to look at this and see if there's another way I can process these negative emotions. And I think that we all can fall prey to that. And I think it's just good to always make sure that what you're doing is healthy and not interfering with your life. And again, she was hanging out with the people who are a lot older than her, and Kayla and Trey, she was hanging out with these two really famous celebrities and who were older than her. And they also led her down a bad path because they too were raised in Hollywood in front of the camera, and they didn't have the best ways to deal with not only each other and their dating relationship, but with the public and the pressure and everything else too.
Absolutely. So not only is the plot realistic, Michelle, but the I loved that you had uh, a happily ever after of a sort, but with consequences, which was very true to life.
Yeah.
Um, how did you make your decisions about how Danny's life would look at the end? Um, it was really well done.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, it was actually a little bit of a struggle because I had originally had a completely different ending when I started writing book one, which I thought this was all going to fit into one book. Because talk about never having written a book before. I'm like, oh, I can cram everything in one book. And then, no, it would have been like an 800-page book. There's no way it was going to fit. So that's why I came up with 3 different books. But in my original take of the whole concept, I had her not recovering from the tragedy. And I hadn't even figured out what the tragedy was yet, but I had her losing everything in shame but mending that relationship with her grandmother and getting a GED and just starting life as a normal person, but yet without any with no skills.
Nobody's gonna know this except us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but it was something that was so, but then the one thing that she had to cling to was that she knew who she was, and she walked away from it because she realized that wasn't who she was, the Danny Trueheart on stage. But the more I wrote, and I actually got a lot of opinions from readers who were like, you better not make Danny have a fall. What do you mean by fall?
Readers want their happy ending.
And I thought about it too. And I did think that, it was a kind of a dire ending compared to, in the end, I didn't want her to be fully just like hitting the skids. I thought that there's something to be like, she was proud of herself personally, but I also was just not happy with her losing everything except like her grandmother. So I kind of sat with it and reworked with it. And I percolate all the time when I'm writing. I'm always working on my next project too. So I was percolating in book 2, and then I finally I took a break in between book 2 and book 3 because I was kind of in a panic, like I was at a crossroads. Where do I go? Where do I go? And that's when I hit on the ending that I did without revealing too much. But because once I accepted the fact that, a fall doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing. Fall, like success,
You
is
pick
relevant.
yourself up again, right?
It's relevant to everyone, and it's personal. It's a personal definition. So I thought, you know what? And that's where it comes in. Like, am I getting what I want, or am I getting something I can live with? And I think that that's kind of how we see Danny mature, is that she's certainly not getting everything she wanted when she set out in Rising Star, all of the list of things she wanted. But I do think that she is, you know what? I'm satisfied with what I'm getting. And I think that she, for better or for worse, she regrets the things that she lost, but she also realizes that to have kept those things, she would have had to give up everything she was striving for. And I think that was just not something that she was in the end, emotionally willing or even capable of doing.
It's a very balanced decision and an empowered one. She's so empowered in this third book and takes everything under her own control because she doesn't know who is there for her. She has to do it. And it makes her quite the hero. It really does. And realistic. I just want to emphasize that again. It's very realistic.
I hope so, because that was something I was really striving for, because I didn't want it to be some completely ridiculous, like that would never happen. Now, granted, I did like accelerate a little bit, like her fame a little bit. It doesn't always happen like that fast. So I accelerated that, but I did want to have like that feeling of like this could legitimately happen. And I do think that we've seen certain celebrities that have like, they've hit a road bump or they've had a scandal and they're like, you know what? And they've just pivoted. And they might be a celebrity in a different sense, or they might just like have stepped away. There are different ways to go about handling really big, and I hate to call it a bump in the road, but it was a huge pivot that she had to make because of that scandal. And then the subsequent things that came out afterwards. And that's kind of thing is like, once the scandal, like that crack appears, everything starts, it's like, cockroaches in a wall, everything starts coming out of the, and so all her other little missteps and deeds were coming out, and she really needed to figure out a way to recover. And I think that the way she did was image saving, as well as it was something that she felt that she could take control of her own career, because up until that point, she'd just been ping-ponging between other people's wishes, really, for the most part.
So I see it as maybe turbulence and not just one bump, but I definitely see it as one of many in probably what she's going to have in her career. It's just the first one. And there's a Buddhist saying that says the cracks are where the light comes in, and that's exactly what happens for her. She can finally see the reality of her life and the past, the present, and the future, and that's really cool. We should all have that ability when we're that young.
Wouldn't that be nice?
So it's really, do you think she had any other choice? It sounds like you do, because you wrote another ending.
I did. Well, yeah, I do think she could have had another choice, but I don't know. Again, because she was urged from pretty much, I think, since book one, to develop that like kind of stage persona, that on-camera presence, to give her that buffer of, because when people reject that presence, she knows it's not her. And that's a really hard concept for most people to come to understand. But when you're putting yourself out there every single day and people are judging you or loving you or hating you based on who you supposedly are, you got to come up with something that protects you. And she never wanted to do that. She wanted to be genuine. And I think that she realizes now the price of her being so genuine is there's nowhere to turn. So she had to make that choice. I don't know that she would have, being who she is, been ever satisfied of stepping away. I don't think she was there yet emotionally. That's something that I can see happening in a later book, because I do plan on coming back and doing a fourth book when she's a little bit older. But I think that
yay!
I'm already working on it, but I have a couple of things I'm working on right now. But I do think that for where she is developmentally and emotionally, she made the choice that rings true with her and who she is. Because I don't think she would have been satisfied, fading into oblivion, living on her grandma's couch because she had to pay out all this money, and just walking away from everything that she'd spent her entire life up until that point striving for.
She's definitely making the choices of your plot. Very character driven. So it's also interesting about who sticks around and who doesn't. I was surprised at who did stick around.
You and me both. That was not originally how it played out in my mind, but I don't know if you have this when you write, but you're writing and sometimes it just like the characters tell you what's going on, and I kept trying to write it differently and it wasn't working.
It's not the way it's
exactly, but
not going that way.
Sometimes they know better than I do. So, and it was a surprise for me too. And it was, again, a little bit bittersweet because she finally kind of gets what she's looking for from the one who sticks around, but then all of that wasted, all that those wasted opportunities from the past. Like and that's what I love about life is because it's always that push and pull, that give and take, like the things that you're getting, but then, oh, if you just gotten it sooner or it hadn't happened, or, I love that, that dark and light play all the time.
I also think that it's really interesting, and this is like life as well, that that so many people are pointing their finger at her, but they didn't see what they could have done differently. And the reader sees what they could have done differently.
Well, and that was the thing with Martin though, too, because like he set out and he was like, had the best of intentions, and he had that contract that he was going over with her, and he was gonna make sure that she didn't have the experience in singing that he had when he was in Revolution in the 80s when he was a teen. And my God, it was like worse. So it was just as bad, well, probably worse than what Martin had gone through, because I think that that's the whole point, is that you can start out in life with the best of intentions, but like anyone else, he got caught up and he took his eye off the goal, and he got caught up in his own self and his own earning money and his relationship that was he'd always been dreaming of having his, and unless you are very mindful and intentional and you keep checking in every single day, not just with you, but the person you're supposed to be taking care of or you're partnered with, it is like, that's so easy to happen. And that's what's so frustrating about Martin, because he'd never been a parent before. And so he didn't have any of those skills. And he'd never been a manager before. He just didn't have everything that he needed, all the tools he needed to do the job. And because the pace of the schedule and the pressure was just so fast and intense, he just lost sight of it. Not out of mean-spiritedness, just out of human, error.
Well, everybody has, well, like you said, light and shadow side, but also we have things we want. And not any single one of us is completely selfless. And so it's really, he was probably my favorite adult character.
I loved him. He was based on one of my friends from college. And
Oh,
and I just love
wonderful.
that. Yeah, my friend Daniel. And I just love that he was so strident in his belief of what Danny should do, like after the accident. And again, and I felt bad, but it kept coming back to him, like, well, if you really felt that way, you should have done this. And they kept pointing out, because he was very firm in his convictions, but yet he hadn't hung on to those convictions the entire time, because he too was one of the reasons why she was in the mess. Like, she didn't get there on her own. She drove the car for sure, but it was an accident that everyone had a hand in. And that's kind of what I like about it, because just those woulda, coulda, shoulda moments that we all have when something bad happens, like, if I just done this wrong, that wrong, left the house 5 minutes later, and that was just, hers was just on an epic scale in front of everyone.
I also think that it's indicative of a teenage brain, because you read so often about families of divorce, or maybe the parent gets sick, or any number of things, and the child blames him or herself. And that's exactly what she's doing.
Yeah.
And incredibly realistic.
Absolutely.
So Eileen Sanchez, hi Eileen, if you're still there, says hello. And we talked a little bit about parental and child relationships and responsibilities. And we talked about before the child is thrust into the limelight. So I think we covered that. Let's talk a little bit about when a parent should let go. Do you have an opinion on that? I don't have an opinion. I think it must be very difficult.
I think it's really personal, because I think every child must be different. I know that my brother and sister and I are all completely different. And so, I think it just depends on the child. And I think, like, we're just to use for example, we're trying to get our son to do his homework on his own. Because when you're like kindergarten, preschool, first grade, whatever, you're like there. And now it's like he's in charge of his own homework. So there's a lot of assignments that could be missing. So we check, and then he has to go talk to the teacher. He has to do the homework. And while so it might be a bumpy year this year with that, but we're teaching him for like high school and college when we're not going to be there.
Right.
And so that for me is our parenting philosophy, is that, you know what, we're trying to give him those tools that he's going to need now and have him make mistakes now when it's safe, like in sixth grade, seventh grade. It's very low stakes right now. And even in high school, I think you get more freedom because you need to have those safe areas to make those social choices and the school choices so you can succeed or fail in a safe environment before you leave the house or you're doing something. So I don't think that there's a hard and fast rule. I think it's just really as your child, as long as they are thriving and they're able to ask for help when they need it. And, I think that that's kind of when you can pull back, but I think it should be a gradual pullback, not just like a drop, like Joe, you just kind of dropped her.
Well, that kind of is what happens to Danny.
Yeah.
So that I know wasn't the right thing to do. But
But for Jody, it
um,
was because she had a goal in mind and she was going to achieve it through one of her kids, no matter what. So
Mhm.
that is, there's a lot of backstory on Jody that was pulled out, and she likes to fancy herself as like a thwarted, star of some sorts that never made it. So she puts a lot of pressure on her kids to live the life that she never got to live.
Yeah, I hear you on that one.
Yeah.
I had a little pressure myself.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering what advice you would give. First of all, what advice you'd give a person wanting a place in the spotlight, having been there, not just about fame itself, but about how to find it or how to keep it and the prices of fame. And that could be any artistic profession.
Yeah. Well, I think that as far as like find like with my writing career, like when I started getting into film in the first place, you do a lot of research, you read, try to meet as many people as you can.
Mhm.
And I worked for free a ton. I would take jobs that were like, it was like if it was remotely related, I would take that job. And I just kept working. And I never said no because I no, never said no to jobs. I always took the job opportunities, let's be very clear. And so I could just work, and I slowly, hopped to different positions. And then I was finally in a position where I was getting calls constantly for work. I think what I would say, and I wish someone had told me, is that you really need to have a clear boundary. What is your goal? Like, you want to know what your goal is. It always helps to know what your goal is, but you really want to know, what are you going to do and what are you not willing to do for that fame? And I had before Me Too, I reported every single incident of like harassment or whatever each and every time. I only lost one job because of it. And all the other places where I worked, they supported me, they helped me, they made sure that I was safe and covered. And so, but I never felt like a job was worth being uncomfortable or worth being forced to do things I didn't want to do.
Yeah.
But that wasn't a very popular position because people would get mad at me when I would report things. So I think that that's something too. You shouldn't feel forced to do something you don't want to do because your goal is this. And you
Mhm.
really need to make sure, and then I finally retired because I wanted to have a family. I'd gotten pregnant and I didn't want to work a 14-hour day. And I didn't want to be worried about the budget or trying to get my cameras for cheaper for the shoot. I wanted to work that hard for myself and for my family, as opposed to spending all those hours doing something on a TV show no one's going to remember in 2 years. So I think that it's really, you need to know.
Some of them will be remembered,
Yeah,
I'm
well,
sure.
yeah,
But
Big Brother for sure. But I do feel like for me, I was really clear, what my boundaries were. And I checked myself often, like, am I doing the things I want to do that's giving myself the life that I want to give? There are certainly plenty of people who are married, who have kids, who have great lives in entertainment, but there's a toll, like on your health, on your family life, on everything, because the jobs are very long hours and they're very high pressure. And you're not like a doctor saving lives
Mhm.
working those long hours. You're working those long hours for entertainment. And while that's very important for society, because we do need to relax, and music and films and TV shows inspire us and make us laugh, I do think it's just, they take a lot too from the people in that industry. So you really have to fight for what you want and be clear with yourself almost every day.
Yeah, you have to be, and again, not entertainment for me. I'm talking media. but you have to be clear with yourself before you can be clear with other people.
Absolutely. And you have to trust that, you know what, and you can't go in guns blazing, flipping off fingers. You have to be able to speak articulately and, almost unemotionally at times, but just make sure that, this makes me uncomfortable. I'm not willing to do that. That's not my description or whatever. And I think nowadays it's much easier to do that. And when I was coming up there, it still was a man's, business. And it was a little bit harder. And I worked a 21-hour a day for $100. I mean, that's ridiculous, but I did it because in order to be on that movie, that's
And
what I had to do.
yeah, I did a lot of contract work.
Yeah.
I understand that, and look the other way. Not so I did have Me Too happen to me, but it wasn't all the time. I wasn't bombarded, and considering my age, that's kind of a miracle. But I looked the other way when other people were doing things,
Yeah.
and sometimes I have regrets about that now. I do.
But I
It was
get what you're
my
saying.
life, you know?
Yeah. It's
It
it's
was
tough, and it's hard because especially too, there was one show where I was being told something and I was very uncomfortable and I was having to go on location, and I went to our unit production manager and I told him what was going on and how I didn't feel comfortable going on location with this person. And he ended up putting me in the office instead, which now, should I have had to take a step back and work in the office and not go on the super cool location shoot? No, but I didn't lose my job. And again, that was something I was willing to compromise on. But it was, there were moments like that where I had to really kind of step up and say something. But each and every time I didn't always feel fully comfortable with the solution. I was always protected. They always had my back. And I only ever lost one job because of it. And I didn't want to work for that guy anyway. So it was fine.
well,
But
probably not if you lost your job because
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. So it's again, so I think that again, know your boundaries. And also too, we had some people who were like wanting to get in the business, and I said, well, I can get you a job like as a PA. Oh, I don't want to do that. Well, that's where you start as an assistant of some sort. So, and I think too is just understanding that there is a lot of paying your dues and a lot of grunt work, and but it can take great places. And then you might even discover jobs that you didn't even know that you want to do. Maybe you want to be a set designer as opposed to like a director because you had this great experience working with these people on a set. So I think that if you try as much as you can, it opens up your mind to all the opportunities available to you, and you're going to learn what you want to do and what you don't want to do job wise.
It's amazing how many people it takes to produce any any production.
Yeah.
I'm being redundant there, but eh, TV show, series, documentary, uh, Brad Pitt phenomenon, whatever. It
Yeah.
just takes so many people, and whenever and by the way, when you're watching something like Netflix, and that's when I used to love the credits the most.
I watch the credits all the time. And my husband's like, really? And I'm like, no. And then I'll see people I know still.
It's about this big now, and then they like it's gone.
Yeah. Or on
And
HBO, they'll like
that
fast forward the credits and show you like a teaser for something else. I'm like, come on, guys. Yeah.
I always
I'd rather
sit there
text
and think, "Oh my god, does these people deserve the credit?" Because
Yeah.
that was a fantastic show.
Yeah. I
Um,
feel the same way.
and
But at
it
least they're on
wasn't
IMDb.
just the person saying the lines that was
Yeah.
doing it.
No,
They
it's
deserve
it's
credit
a
too.
whole thing. It's a whole thing. And again, like I feel like I got a very good Hollywood experience, even though I was never in front of the camera, because you're meeting so many people and you're getting this inside look at how like television and film is made from start to finish. And it's just it's exciting and fun. Glad I did it when I was younger, that I'm not doing it now, but I definitely am glad that I gave it a chance for sure.
Well, I'm certain that you added quite a bit to it considering everything you worked on, and so I thank you for that. So here's a question. What would you do if your son wanted to join the business? What would you tell him, or what would you do? Or
Well, I don't like to squash anyone's dreams. So short of him like saying, Mom, I want to be the next Pablo Escobar, I would squash that dream. But short of like, I want to support his dreams. So if he really wanted to work, and I've talked to him some of my funny stories of growing up, and I mean, being in the business, I always keep calling it growing up because I was so young. And then also some of my not so fun stories, not the Me Too stuff by any means, but just like, weird situations or long hours or what have you. I would encourage him to do it. But to try and dissuade him, I would make him go like on shadow a couple of all night shoots, like back to back, so we could see what it's like to like work all night and then like go to sleep during the day and then be back there again by like 4 o'clock doing it again for like the next 12 hours or whatever. Because it is like a hard life and trying to squeeze everything in. And then you're working split hours and again, doctors, truckers do it all the time, but we're not doing anything that's, like that. But everything is so expensive that everything is super important. And there's a lot of pressure because, like you said, there's so many people booked. Everything costs a lot of money. So the pressure is unreal to try and make your schedule and keep everything going and keep the schedule going. So I would hope he would do something different, but we'll see. He so far has not expressed any interest. He's thinking of maybe astronaut, engineer, police officer, that kind of thing. So we'll see.
I can't wait to hear because it goes fast.
Yeah.
Eileen also says, still here, enjoying the conversation, new series for me. Good. It's such a great series, Eileen. You're going to love it.
I hope you like it, Eileen.
And so will everyone. It has a social consciousness behind it. And it's really great writing. So I think we're at the point where we need to talk about what you're working on next.
Well, I'm actually working on turning this whole series into a television pitch. So I'm right now in my script, so I'm working on that, and I'm hoping to finish that whole thing pretty soon. And then I've got it's something that I wrote to be pitched as a television series that almost got picked up as a telenovela, but then they changed their mind at the last minute. And I'm going to I'm going to back that into a book, and maybe a book series, but for adults, a contemporary adult comedy / romance. So that series will be called The Accidental Madam. So I'm working on that.
Madam?
The Accidental Madam, yeah. So there you go. So yeah, so those are the two things I'm working on right now.
I should have seen that answer coming, and I didn't. I'm so excited. Good luck.
Thank you.
You need luck. It's so visual, and it's.
Oh, I hope so. I hope so. I mean, because it's just like between the music and the costumes and like the travel and everything, I think it would be a great series. And I do feel like it's got some legs there. It's just, getting someone to believe it enough to spend some cash on it. So that's what I'm hoping for.
I hear you.
Yeah.
I hear you about that one. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I want to thank Danny Trueheart from the bottom of my heart for giving us this time to talk about what stardom really is, because you understand from behind the scenes, and it's all there in your trilogy. And please tell us where people can find you and your books and your next project.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. It's just been great. You can get all of the books in the Danny Trueheart series, The Rise and Fall of Danny Trueheart, on Amazon, Walmart, Target, in Barnes and Nobles, at Waterstones if you're overseas, Blackstones. They're sold everywhere, and they're in libraries too across the United States. So definitely request it in your library, pick up a copy on Amazon, and it's available in paperback, audio, and Kindle.
Fantastic. And you can find Michele. I want to spell your name out. Michele, 1L, Kwasniewski, MicheleKwasniewski.com. You can always contact her there. And I'm going to share my teabag wisdom, because this is so totally about Danny. Without gratitude, there is no prosperity. And I think that's a huge thing that she learned in book 3. So that's my teabag wisdom.
Very fitting. Thank you so much. And I like your mug too.
Oh, well, thank you. I kind of like it too. I favorite. I told you where you can find us. You can join me here every third Thursday at Facebook interviewing authors like Michele. We'll be here again live with authors next month. So post your questions beforehand if you want, if you can't come live, and we'll answer them. You can find all my interviews on YouTube as well as archived here on Facebook. You can find more about me at katherinebrownramsperger.com. I'm wishing all of you out there a happy summer. Almost there, readers. And beach reads are coming no matter where you are. I wish you sunshine and a great book to read. Such a great conversation. Thanks for Story Hour, Michele. See
Thanks,
you
Kat.
soon.
Bye.